Walk into a modern classroom and everything looks advanced. Tablets on desks, smart boards on walls, learning apps everywhere. But behind this high-tech setup, teachers are noticing something deeply troubling. Kids can read words on a screen faster than ever, yet many can't explain what those words mean. They reread sentences again and again, lose track of ideas halfway through a page, and give up the moment reading feels hard. This isn't a coincidence, and it isn't because kids suddenly became less capable. Something fundamental has changed in how young minds interact with text, and technology is at the center of it. Reading was once a slow, focused act. You opened a book, followed ideas from start to finish, and let your mind build meaning over time. Today, reading competes with an endless stream of notifications, videos, and instant entertainment. Kids aren't just reading differently, they're thinking differently. The same devices designed to educate and connect them are quietly reshaping how their brains process language. To understand why kids are getting worse at reading, we need to look beyond schools and parenting and examine how technology has transformed attention, imagination, and comprehension itself. 1. How reading trains the brain, and how screens interrupt its reading is not an automatic human skill. The brain must be trained to focus, interpret symbols, remember context, and connect ideas across time. Traditional reading strengthens these abilities by forcing the brain to slow down and stay engaged. Screens do the opposite. Digital content encourages rapid scanning, quick reactions, and constant switching. When kids grow up consuming mostly short-form content, their brains adapt to speed rather than depth. They become efficient at recognizing words, but weak at understanding meaning. Over time, deep reading begins to feel unnatural and exhausting. 2. Scrolling conditions the brain to avoid difficulty. Books demand patience. They don't offer instant rewards, and they require effort before satisfaction arrives. Technology removes that friction. With one swipe, kids can abandon anything that feels boring or challenging. This trains the brain to associate effort with discomfort and escape. So when a child encounters a complex paragraph or unfamiliar vocabulary, their instinct isn't to slow down, it's to quit. Reading becomes something to endure rather than enjoy. Not because kids can't read, but because their brains have been conditioned to avoid struggle. 3. Fragmented attention is destroying comprehension. Good reading requires sustained attention. You must hold ideas in your mind long enough to connect them. But modern technology fractures attention into short bursts. Notifications interrupt focus. Multitasking becomes normal, and silence feels uncomfortable. Many kids read while music plays, messages pop up, or videos run in the background. Their brains never fully enter a state of concentration. As a result, they may understand individual sentences, but fail to grasp the overall meaning of a passage. Reading turns into a shallow activity with little retention. 4. Visual media replaces mental imagination. When kids read books, they must imagine characters, settings, emotions, and events. This mental construction strengthens creativity and abstract thinking. Screens remove that responsibility. Videos provide ready-made images and emotions, leaving little for the brain to create. Over time, imagination muscles weaken. When kids return to text without visuals, reading feels dull and demanding. This is why many children raised on heavy video consumption struggle with descriptive language, symbolism, and complex narratives. Their brains expect to be shown meaning, not build it. 5. Digital language is shrinking. Vocabulary online communication favors speed and simplicity. Short sentences, slang, emojis, and abbreviations dominate digital spaces. While efficient, this language exposure limits vocabulary growth. Books introduce rare words, complex grammar, and nuanced expression. When kids read less deeply, they encounter fewer new words, which makes reading harder. That difficulty leads to avoidance, creating a cycle where limited vocabulary reduces comprehension, and reduced comprehension discourages reading. Over time, reading ability plateaus not from lack of intelligence, but from lack of linguistic exposure. 6. Schools are competing with algorithms. Education was never designed to compete with technology engineered for addiction. Social media platforms are built by experts whose goal is to capture attention for as long as possible. Teachers and textbooks simply can't match that level of stimulation. So when kids are asked to read quietly, their brains compare the experience to the digital world waiting for them. Reading loses not because it lacks value, but because it lacks immediate excitement. The classroom becomes the quietest place in a very loud digital life. 7. Reading struggles don't show up immediately. They compound over time. One of the most dangerous parts of this problem is how slowly it reveals itself. A child can appear perfectly fine in early grades, reading aloud smoothly and recognizing words accurately. But as they grow older, reading shifts from simple decoding to complex understanding. Texts become longer, ideas become layered, and meaning stretches across pages instead of sentences. This is where text-shaped reading habits start to fail. Kids who are trained on short bursts of content struggle to hold ideas in their minds long enough to analyze them. Subjects like history, science, and literature become overwhelming not because the material is too hard, but because deep reading is now mentally exhausting. By the time this gap becomes obvious, it's already deeply ingrained. 8. When reading becomes optional. Thinking becomes shallow in earlier generations. Reading wasn't optional. It was the primary way to learn, escape, and understand the world. Today, almost every piece of information can be consumed without reading at all. Videos summarize books, podcasts explain articles, and short clips replace long explanations. While this feels efficient, it quietly removes the need to wrestle with ideas on your own. When kids no longer practice interpreting text independently, they lose the habit of questioning, pausing, and reflecting. Thinking becomes passive. Instead of engaging with ideas, they absorb conclusions handed to them. Reading, which once trained independent thought, is replaced by consumption and, over time, that shift changes how young minds approach knowledge itself. Kids aren't getting worse at reading because they're lazy, distracted, or incapable. They're getting worse because the environment that shaped their brains changed faster than education could adapt. Technology trained them to skim instead of reflect, to scroll instead of stay, and to react instead of reason. Reading didn't disappear, it just became harder in a world built for speed. And if we don't recognize this shift, the cost won't just be lower test scores. It will be a generation that struggles to think deeply, question critically, and understand complex ideas. The real challenge isn't banning technology, it's teaching kids how to live with it, without letting it rewrite how their minds work.